Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about subtracting fractions, and that might seem like a bit of a throwback problem, but it is important for 7th grade if you're doing number sense standard number 1, where you have to add and subtract integers or positive and negative fractions and decimals. So when we're working with positive and negative fractions, we really need to know how to work with simply positive fractions. So let's review how to subtract fractions. And in particular, I want to talk about borrowing because that really throws people for a curve. So check it out. I'm going to make a little story for the first one to help it make sense. Imagine you're a farmer and you have 4 fields. Right? We have 4 fields here. And what we're going to try and do is take 1 and 2/5, right down here I have 1 and 2/5 fields. I want to set those aside for Brussels sprouts. So I'm going to write 1 and 2/5. And I'm curious how many fields or how much I will have left over to plant other things, maybe something tastier than Brussels sprouts, like, I don't know, a nice butter leaf lettuce or something like that. So let's take a look. The first thing you'll notice is that I don't have any fifths, right? I want to plant sprouts down here, and I'm going to plant them in these things called fifths. But you might notice I don't have any fields that are this size. So where am I going to get those fifths? Well, I'm going to take one of the fields that I do have, and I'm going to chop it up, right? So let's see here. I'm going to take this field, and I'm going to cut it into fifths. And see, one whole field should give me how many fifths? If I've made these the right size, it should work out pretty well. It should give me 5/5. Perfect, right? So what I've just done is I've taken that 4 and I've crossed one out. I've taken one and cut it up, and that leaves me with 3 whole fields. And now I have 5/5. Because you probably realize that 1 of any number is going to equal a fraction that is the same on the top and the bottom. I could have cut it into 5/5. I could have also taken that field and cut it into 4/4, or 10/10, or anything else, right? When I borrow from a whole number, I'm going to get a fraction that is the same on the top and the bottom. Now, I didn't pick 4/4 because I'm trying to plant sprouts in fifths, so I cut it into fifths. It would be silly for me to cut it into some other denominator, right? And the reason that would be is that I want my fractions to line up in the same place value. This is the fifths place, and I can stack it right on top of the fifths place. All right, so now I am good to go. I can simply subtract. I have 5/5. I'm going to take away 2/5. That's going to leave me with 3/5 for that lettuce. And I have 3 whole fields. I took away 1 to plant those darn sprouts, and now I have 2 whole fields left over for lettuce. So let's see if we can color code these and see if this actually worked out, right? I am going to plant sprouts in 1 and 1, 2, 2/5, and then I'm going to of my fields, and that should leave me with 2 and 3/5 for lettuce. So 1 for lettuce, 2 for lettuce, and 1, 2, 3/5 left over for lettuce, right? So good. When we're borrowing, what we're really doing is we're taking a whole number and we are turning it into a fraction with the right denominator. All right, let's take a look at another one. Oftentimes this one doesn't have too much of a storyline, so let's talk about other things. Oftentimes you'll see fractions written horizontally like this with your equal sign over here. And that is a mistake. What you want to try and do is take these problems and rewrite them, putting the place values on top of each other. So what I'm going to do is I will take the 1 here and I will move it into the 1's place. And I'll do the same thing with the 4ths. I will move them into the 4ths place. And now I can subtract. I'm just going to move this over a little bit so we can see better. Why don't I just go ahead and move the subtraction sign while I'm at it? Okay, there we go. And now we should be able to subtract. The reason I was able to stack these on top of each other is because they are both already fourths. Okay, please notice that these are already the same. If you're dealing with fractions, if you're adding and subtracting fractions that don't have a common denominator already, you'll have to change them to a common denominator first. When you're adding and subtracting, you need things to line up in their right place value. That's why we have to have a common denominator when adding and subtracting. All right, so let's go ahead and do it. 1/4 minus 3/4. Realize I don't have enough fourths to subtract. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow, right? I'm going to take that field, I'm going to take one of those fields and cut it up into fourths. That leaves me with 2 whole fields. Now here's the mistake people often make. When we borrow, they often think I should just stick a 1 there, that I somehow borrowed 10 fourths. So I had 1, and then I borrowed 10 more. That makes 11. That doesn't make sense, right? That's a mistake that we make from elementary school. We're used to just sticking a 1 in front of things. That's not how it works. Remember, when you borrow 1 whole, you're borrowing, in this case, 4 fourths, right? That's what equals 1. In fact, I should kind of remember that I could draw a 1 around this, right? Whenever the numerator and the denominator are the same, it equals 1. So what we have now is 2. I should get back to our original colors here. What I have now is 2 left over in the 1's place, and I have 1/4 plus 4 fourths, right? So that gives me a total of 5 fourths. And down here, I'm going to continue to subtract. I can just go ahead and subtract my 1 and 3/4. 5 minus 3 is 2 fourths. And I'm going to subtract the 1's place. 2 minus 1 is 1. And that's all there is to it. Some people might notice, hey, that's not all there is to it. We should simplify this. And you're right. We could rewrite this as 1 and 1/2. 1 and 1/2. Okay, so this is the most important part. When you are borrowing, you have some amount to begin with. Obviously, it's not enough. That's why you're borrowing. And you are going to borrow some more of these things. These things are fourths. And so in this case, I'd borrow 4 fourths. If they were fifths, I'd borrow 5 fifths. If they were tenths, I'd borrow 10 tenths. But you've got to add what you had to what you borrowed, And then it'll give you your new total, 2 and 5 fifths, right? That equals 5 fifths. All right, hopefully that'll do it for you. See you later.